Hey, welcome to the channel. I'm Reed here in the Cozy Racing Service course, and today we're going to go over some tips and tricks for doing a bar swap on a 2020 felt AR disc. Now, you might be wondering why I wanted to do a bar swap on this bike, and initially it was primarily tied to fit. These are the Devox carbon bars that were on it, and their drop is 125. I'm used to running over 140 millimeters of drop and pretty comfortable with that. So I was looking at alternatives. I wanted to use the Thompson Aero carbon bar, but it's actually not Di2 compatible because this bike came with the bar and junction box. So I opted for the Pro Vibe Aero, which is only 130 millimeters of drop. After actually riding this Devox bar for a couple hundred kilometers, I kind of added in comforts into those reasons for wanting to swap the bar, because this was feeling pretty buzzy. I was getting some numbness and was looking to try and find something that was maybe a little bit more comfortable on the road. This was actually my first time dealing with internally routed hoses on a bar or a frame. Previously, I'd only done straight shots through a fork blade, which is obviously pretty easy to deal with, either on my own bikes or on those of friends or teammates. This video is going to give you some tips and tricks for this process. If you've looked over the felt video or the pro video that goes with this particular bar, the felt video is about 3.5 minutes long, and I promise this will take a lot longer than 3 minutes. But it's good info just to get yourself prepared for it. I've got that linked in the description. The pro video is just over 10 minutes, and half of that talks about the matching stem, which obviously we're not going to use because we've got the factory felt stem on it that gives that really nice clean look. Okay, if you are considering doing this project, you probably understand that it's a bit of a task because of these internally routed hoses and wires. We're going to give a look here at the underside of this stem where the hoses go in, and actually on the stock bar the Di2 wire followed one of the hoses. One of the nice things about this bar actually is there's a hole in the middle of the bar that can go straight into the stem. That is part of their steerer mounted battery setup, which this bike obviously doesn't have. So it's a little bit dirty from riding, but kind of gives you a look at how this is put together. So Pro, and I suspect most other bars where you're internally routing hoses, recommends that you route the hoses from the lever to the center of the bar. Because you've got this sharp bend right here to get the hoses around and out the hole, which on this bar is on the inside of the bar. So that leaves you in a little bit of a conundrum if you are following the guidelines that Felt gives in their video when you're cutting the steerer, because then you're going to be routing the hose from the inside towards the outside. So one of the things I'd recommend is to plan on completely replacing the front hose for the front brake, because that way you can route it the way that Pro recommends, through the bend in the bar initially, out the middle. Then it's going to be pretty easy to put it through the stem and through the steerer and down out to the caliper. So you'll just need to have some extra fittings, the olives, to get that new hose installed, but I think that's going to make things a lot easier. If you do go ahead and decide to leave the rear hose in place, you can do what I did for both of the hoses, and that's actually I ran an inner steel brake cable into that hydraulic hose. I ran it through the bar this direction to the middle, out the middle, and then I ran it into the hose and used that as a guide as I pushed the hose back towards the lever. But even then, that hose, or that cable's not super stiff, and the hose definitely is a bit stiffer, and I ended up using some picks to kind of help pull it out the end and get it over to the lever. So the wire routing was actually really easy because Pro ships this bar with a bunch of guides, and if you watch their video, they give a really nice tip on how to convert an old shift cable to a guide for the internal DI2 wires. Felt's got on their video, they show using a Park tool piece, but between this, it made it really easy. Okay, one more thought for you as we look down under the compression cap. You can see that there's actually a protective cover over the front brake hose here, just to give it some protection in its routing, and that comes installed from Felt. Now, one of the issues is that actually makes it kind of technically impossible to cut the steerer in the way that they show, which is actually pulling the caliper off, sliding the hose completely out of the way of the saw blade as you cut the steerer. So I ended up cutting around the hose, and that was one of the other reasons that I suggest just planning on maybe doing a whole new run of hose, or completely removing it and then replacing the existing one back in place, because that issue with cutting the steerer, it might just be faster overall to pull that hose out. One last thought about this top cap is that this is a really shallow bolt for this compression top cap. So be really careful as you're tightening down and compressing that headset not to strip the bolt out. Mine's a little bit scrubby looking even just after taking it in and out a few times, because it's pretty easy for that wrench to slip. But anyway, that's kind of the review on this Pro Vibe bar swap. So far I'm definitely happy with how it rides. If you've seen some of the reviews, you know it's a little bit of a weird shape down in the drops here. And that's kind of the only question mark I have, is that it actually gets really narrow through here. The heel of my hand sits back here pretty nicely, but it's taking a little bit of getting used to. I may end up double wrapping kind of this section right here to see if I can get a little bit nicer fit. But honestly, the top of the hoods is wonderful. It's really comfortable. So, and overall numbness and vibration haven't seemed like as much of an issue with that setup. So there we go.